Hello, everyone. So I've been doing a lot of thinking and reading and listening to what contemporary people are saying, what people from the 1980s, 70s, 90s predicted, just about kind of the direction we're going. And specifically, as an artist, I've been trying to think about what my role will be in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, as all this technology and AI and the world just seems to be going faster and faster. Because I truly believe that like having an open mind and being willing to is just like the biggest strength in this environment we live in now, the ability to adapt. It's the salamanders who are able to go from water to land. And so I think there's changing times and we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think the adaptiveness is going to be the most valuable trait that any individual can have. So specifically for the artist, I don't think like there's a group of people that understand their perspective that I've been kind of associated with in the art community who I think their future is going to be more like the Amish, which, you know, they're great, they're doing their own thing, but they're kind of obscure. You don't really hear much about them, but they're kind of set in that tradition, in that old way of doing things. And so I think a lot of artists are going to just kind of reject all the new things that all the new tools basically, and just get set in their ways. And I think it's going to make people get more lost, more stuck behind than people who didn't adapt building a website or using the computer as far as their careers of this like last kind of wave of technological advancement. I think it's going to be way faster and way more intense than that. But I guess listening to people like Terence McKenna, who have these very intergalactic, cosmic scale of viewing the world, it seems like a lot of his ideas are becoming more and more, maybe not validated, but not disproven. Like things seem to be going that direction for the most part. I mean, you take away some of his crazy ideas like the time wave theory in 2012, stuff like that. But a lot of his ideas are resonating truer than ever today. And so I've been thinking about like where it's going with the arts and I guess kind of working up to this crazy idea I have for where the end goal is for the arts, but kind of breaking it down into like 5 stages that I think will kind of show you the kind of the direction of how I was thinking of getting to this final stage. So the first stage is where we're in now, and it's what I've been playing with recently, and it's very cosmetic, like a gift shop type technology. I don't know what you would call that. Just like kind of like cool, and it showcases some really interesting things. But I think what's so cool about it is the potential that it's leading to. And so this is like being able to take my paintings, the work that I've done with oil on a physical like linen with oil paint, a lot of them working from life or, you know, using other types of models and photographs and stuff like that. But it's a physical painting. And then being able to take that image and to animate it into really interesting ways and juxtapose that with AI generated music or instrumental type sounds. It's very interesting. It's just kind of giving some sort of life and kind of opening like this from being just something that's stationary into something that's a bit more of hinting at a world that's being created, even though there's no way to enter into it. It's just peering in from a window into one specific scene, but there's this kind of movement that's unfolding, and I think it's very interesting. And so I think this is kind of what we're seeing like in the first stages of this, where like the viewer remains very passive and you're just observing the animation as it's like unfolding. But it's the first step of kind of like externalizing the imagination and making art more alive. And this isn't something new. This is what's done in movies, stuff like that. It's just that this ability has been given access to people who don't have that skill anymore. So now all of a sudden everyone can make these things. It's not just someone who goes to school or to some sort of trade school and have all these life experiences of dedicating so much time to learn these skills. It's something that you can focus on something completely tangential and then use those skills without having to invest so much time at it. So it's a very unique perspective. And then I think what we're starting to see very, very small hints at, which I kind of called the second stage in this, is where we'll have like interactive 2D worlds. And so this is essentially like a playground or a video game, something like that. And there's this really cool article that came out, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago maybe. It seems like a long time ago as far as like AI development, but it was relatively very recent. That I think it was Google. They had designed a specific engine using AI to basically run the 1990s video game Doom directly through using AI. There's no, like, that underlining code is not there. It's being generated purely imagistically as like a next predictor type thing, but from a video game perspective. I don't quite understand this at all of the intricate detail, but the fact that this opens up the door to, you know, a lot of people are saying that the future of video games is going to be very easily sending these games around, because they're very small files, because the game generates as you move around in it. And this has so much potential. And I think what the role of the artist is going to be at this point is big gaming companies that have hundreds of employees, if not thousands. But there's tons of people working to design, like, you know, Grand Theft Auto or Halo or Call of Duty or games like this, that it's all going to compress down to a single person. And so there's no monetary incentive, because it could be just for you. There could be monetary incentives, but what would it look like if something like, you know, that sort of investment into some sort of interactive world that had no monetary investment? You would have some artists who would create insanely interesting games just because they're interesting, or not even games. There doesn't even need to be that strong of a storyline to it, but of just like some world that you can move around in like a game. And so you're controlling it in some way. And so I think what that would look like for me, once that technology gets to that stage, is basically still oil painting and creating these scenes, but then playing with it in this two-dimensional, or this 2D interactive world, which would be like digital, and trying to work with how it can generate assets and supportive elements into the world that I didn't paint, I didn't create, but that is taking the essence of what I did create and fitting it in unbelievably, indistinguishably tightly with what I had envisioned to make. And so I think this will open up some really interesting ideas with the beginning of creating a sort of landscape or environment that the artist can create, that people can interact with. And I think the first thing people will think about is a video game, but I think it very quickly evolves into something very different, because it wouldn't necessarily have a monetary restriction to entry into. And I think that would be like a form of learning and discovery by interacting in these worlds and, you know, talking with these different LLMs or something that's has a communication element within this environment. I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities with that, and I think we are already seeing that. I don't think that's that far away from now. And so I'm very excited to, once we get to that stage where it's a 2D, you know, it's a screen you're looking at, but you have audio, you have visual, you have a landscape that you can navigate two-dimensionally using a controller of some sort. I think that is very interesting. And then I think the third stage, which I don't think we're quite at yet, but there's no reason why this isn't coming down the pipeline very shortly, would be like a 3D world rendering. And so this would be where the VR, virtual reality, augmented reality would be coming into maturity, because I still think like the whole like metaverse, VR, all that stuff, it was a bit ahead of what it was possible of doing. It's kind of like with the iPhone. There wasn't a whole lot of new technology, if any at all, in the iPhone. It was just the shrinking down of computer components, the touch screen, just the cellular capabilities, the camera, all these other elements were all working and evolving independently in unison. And then what Apple was able to do was to just put them all together, and it reached over this threshold where the utility of it was greater than the cost it was to create. And once that happened, it just kept snowballing and snowballing, and it changed the world in that way. And so I think right now VR is an aspect of it, but when it was first kind of, getting introduced with these, was it Oculus and what's the Meta version, Quest? I think it was a little ahead of its time because there's not much of an audience for that now. But I think with the advancements of AI, I think that we're not too far away from these like multiple different technologies all converging and making it become something that is much widely used. Because right now it's very niche, it's a novelty thing. And I think once that changes, I think people will think very differently about that. And so I guess I think that is actually not super different from like a 2D world rendering. It's just instead of controlling it on a 2D screen, you're wearing something. And so you're seeing this 2D screen, but you're having this this gyroscopic effect of being able to navigate through it and like look around. And this is the first time that the human has a real strong agency and could begin to start like synthesizing a sense of agency and direction within these worlds that I think would be very interesting. And then I think the fourth stage is kind of the bridge between maybe what's more like believable and then what's like way out there on the fringes of what could be possible. And so this kind of bridges the gap. But I think there's a lot of development going on with the BCIs, the brain chip implants, and they're already doing tests on monkeys where they're able to generate images, light, very, very basic visual input into monkeys directly through the brain through electrical impulses. And so this is not when this technology begins to mature, both with visual and I would imagine audio would be maybe easier. I think the area of your brain that has to do with like sensory input, I believe it's the image consists of most of that area that's designated to sensory input in the brain. And so I think audio, I think smell, all these things, you could actually induce those through electrical impulses. I don't think there's anything that goes against the laws of physics to be able to do this. And we're already seeing this tech start to get evolved. And I think if we assume, or if we reach a threshold with AI, that AI becomes advanced enough to augment AI research, then we can scale up the scientific research and all sorts of different things extremely fast. And so I think that's the threshold, is once AI begins to augment AI research, that this threshold will be met. And so I think this is the part of the kind of progression where people are actually beginning to enter into these landscapes and build them both externally and within the landscape through using basically being able to modulate and change the world from within that you're creating. And so I think this is ultimately what gets me really excited, is to be able to actually create some sort of world that people can interact with. And I think this is very exciting, and it has a lot of possibilities. And I don't think this means that, we enter into this world and we can never go back to ours, but it's something that we can navigate back and forth from. I think Terence McKenna, a lot of controversial stuff he said. One of his ideas of the future is that if an alien was to look at the human race in the future, it would actually look like we devolved. The Earth would go back to a much earlier state. And what would actually be happening would be that basically humans would be back at an equilibrium, living in a harmony with nature. And then this capitalist endeavor of the best idea wins, and charting this unknown territory doesn't take place on the physical Earth. It takes place, I think he said, like some sort of black contact or something that goes in your eye, and on command you can go into this other dimension, and you could go to the Eiffel Tower. You could live, in Florence just with a push of, whatever the equivalent of a button would be, that you can basically navigate these spaces. And I think once we kind of get to that stage 4, we're starting to understand that, maybe there is some sort of, I think the imagination becomes a bit more tangible and concrete at that point. And I think people will start creating new worlds, and there'll be both people who create the new worlds and, the person who creates the coolest world, more people will want to join it. So there's still this like capitalist, the best wins essentially. And so I think there'll be both the people that create it and then people who are just purely explorers, are just going into these different worlds and navigating them, and much like going on a hike and just seeing what it is in this world, what kind of laws of physics, what sort of reality exists in here. And I think this opens up to tons of really interesting new ideas, and I think would give humans a lot of meaning in a way that is not the first principles orders of surviving of that I think a lot of humanoid robots have a potential of replacing. And then the stage 5, which is kind of this like very trippy, dreamy, out there idea, but a lot of people have envisions that once artificial superintelligence. Some of these ideas around right there, I think are much more extreme even, but very interesting to think about. And so I think this would be the moment where, all of our sensory input, what constitutes our reality is all electronic impulses that's coming in. The things we touch, the things we see, the things we smell, these experiences we have, they're all, your brain is in a dark box or a dark sphere in your head, and it's getting all of its information through electrical impulses. And there is nothing against the laws of physics that would stop you being able to replicate any sort of reality we experience purely through electrical impulses on command. And I think if this is like the end, this is going all the way down the as far as I could see of where this technology would go. After this point, I think the mathematical term for it would be like the singularity. It's the point at where the theory falls off and becomes obsolete. And so I think this point would be the one where we could essentially, as humans, create our own world and live in it and explore other worlds, and of course, stay in our world if we want to. But I think what constitutes the imagination and reality blurs. I think there's this interesting kind of trajectory where the soul is in the process of becoming more externalized and the body is becoming more internalized, and there'll be this threshold where they become the same essentially. And so that, in my mind, would be indistinguishable from like the alchemist's idea of like the philosopher's stone, that the philosopher's stone was essentially a physical material object that you made that had the properties of soul and spirit. So basically, if you wanted to sleep, you could stretch out the stone and sleep on it. It would be the most comfortable bed. Or if you needed a shower, you could stretch it up and water would come out. Or if you needed to go somewhere, you could get on it and ride it where you needed to go. But basically anything that you could think of, there was no distinction between mind and physical reality. That was the idea of the philosopher's stone. And so I think at that point, that would constitute having that basically. And I think that is a world that I think would be a really good world to live in. And I think it would be purely by choice. I think people would want to go into these worlds and start exploring things that are so foreign and so interesting and so novel. And I think there could be a possibility where, there's a schism of all these different realities that get made, and then maybe an implosion of a consensus of this is one or a few that are deemed by everyone like this is the best one to live in. This guy has everything going for it. And I think there could become a time where we kind of solve that problem of where it is that we want to go. So another kind of image that sticks in my mind when I think about what this would look like is I recently watched the TV show by Duncan Trussell. What's it called? The Midnight Gospel. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's definitely worth watching. It's an animation. The plot is individual who's creating a documentary series, I forget, of some sort, or some sort of vlogging thing. But he's basically needing to interview people, and he's on this little this planet in a little intergalactic RV in this dimension, basically, and he like has a Grok equivalent, some sort of AI assistant that basically, you know, finds these other realities, these other dimensions, and he goes into them and basically has these life experiences, these stories, like talks with these entities in all these different very strange worlds, and finds the beauty in this variety of this extreme novelty. And I think that's going to be what it's kind of like, where more people are, if they want to, are going to be able to just start adventuring and just see what's out there. And I think people are going to see that, you know, the world is not only weirder than you think it is, it's weirder than you can imagine it to be. And I think that's, for me, who I've always struggled with becoming bored with how things are. This gives me a lot of hope and excitement about, you know, the future of humanity and the future of the role of the artist. I guess I'm extremely biased because I am an artist. So this ontology, this worldview, this future, these ideas about the future I'm thinking of are the ideas that, if they came to fruition, would put the role of the artist as the highest possible thing, which yeah, as an artist, extremely biased toward that direction. So anyways, that's at least something very kind of speculative, but that is something that's like always on the back of my mind, is like how do I try to create some sort of world with oil painting, so that when I can actually create that world, I got the blueprints to do that.